You wake up in the morning and eat breakfast. A few hours later, you have lunch. Then, at night, dinner. It feels completely normal, just part of everyday life. But stop for a second. Why 3 meals? Why not 2? Why not 4? Who decided this was the right number? And why did billions of humans end up following almost the same basic pattern? The surprising part? No doctor invented it, no scientist created it, and no ancient human genius sat down and decided, 3 meals a day sounds perfect. The story is much stranger than that, because the schedule you follow today was built piece by piece, by the way human society changed. To understand how, we have to go back to a world with no breakfast alarm, no lunch break, and no dinner at 7. For most hunter-gatherers, food wasn't organized around a clock. There was no fixed breakfast, no guaranteed lunch, no rule saying dinner had to happen at night. People ate when food was available. A successful hunt could mean a large, shared feast. Another day might bring smaller amounts of roots, fruit, nuts, or other foods. Hunger mattered. So did the season. Travel mattered too. And most importantly, availability mattered. Nature didn't ring a bell 3 times a day. But then, humans changed the way they lived, and food changed with them. Agriculture was a huge turning point. Once people began planting crops, raising animals, storing grain, and living in permanent settlements, food became more predictable. You could harvest grain, store it, grind it, and cook it later. Food no longer had to be eaten the moment someone found it. Daily life became more predictable too. People worked fields, tended animals, ground grain, prepared bread, and gradually, regular eating times became easier to organize around regular work. But here's the important part. Agriculture still didn't create the 3-meal rule. There was no universal breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Different civilizations developed different eating habits. Take ancient Egypt. Some workers could begin the day with bread, beer, and onions, then eat a larger meal later. Wealthier households could have very different routines, and a farmer's eating schedule wasn't necessarily the same as a soldier's, or a servant's, or a wealthy merchant's. So even when people ate in the morning, around midday, and later in the day, that didn't mean they were following our modern 3-meal schedule. The pattern was still flexible. And then we reach another civilization that seems like an obvious suspect. Ancient Rome. Maybe the Romans invented our 3 meals. Not exactly. Romans could have a light morning meal, a midday meal, and a much larger meal called cena. Sounds familiar, right? But here's the catch. Cena wasn't always an evening dinner. Earlier in Roman history, it could happen around midday. Over time, that major meal shifted later. So the Romans didn't hand us the schedule either. We're getting closer, but we're still missing something. Now jump forward to medieval and early modern Europe. This is where another familiar assumption starts to fall apart. For centuries, many English people commonly ate 2 main meals, rather than the breakfast, lunch, and dinner routine we know today. One of those meals was called dinner, but dinner didn't necessarily mean nighttime. In the late 15th and early 16th centuries, the main meal could happen at around 11 in the morning. Imagine telling someone today, dinner is at 11 a.m. It sounds completely wrong, but to them, our schedule might have sounded just as strange. And breakfast? It wasn't always the unquestioned daily ritual it is today. Eating early could be useful for people who had work, travel, or other demanding activities ahead of them. Over time, breakfast became more common, but there was still one missing piece: lunch. And this is where the story gets even more interesting. The word lunch existed in earlier forms connected with a small amount of food, but lunch had not yet become the fixed midday meal millions of people now expect. So for a long time, humans had morning food, and a main meal later, but the modern 3-part schedule still wasn't fully formed. Then something happened that changed far more than food. The clock took over. The Industrial Revolution transformed daily life. Factories expanded, Cities grew. Millions of people began working jobs controlled by fixed schedules. And suddenly, being somewhere at a particular time mattered more than ever. Workers had to arrive on time. Children had school schedules. Factories ran in shifts. The working day was divided into blocks. And here's the part that matters. Our eating schedule began adapting to the working schedule. Morning food made sense before a long workday. At midday, workers needed something quick and convenient, and the larger family meal increasingly moved toward evening when people returned home. Morning, midday, evening, breakfast, lunch, dinner. There it was, but nobody officially invented it. No scientist announced it, no doctor prescribed it, no ruler declared that every human must eat exactly 3 times a day. Instead, the pattern formed piece by piece. Breakfast became more common. Lunch filled the middle of the working day, dinner moved later, and industrial society helped turn those eating times into a familiar daily rhythm. But before you think the mystery is completely solved, there's one more thing to understand. Even today, humans don't follow one universal meal schedule. Different cultures eat at different times. Some make lunch the biggest meal, some eat dinner much later. Some people snack throughout the day, others eat fewer meals. So, who invented 3 meals a day? Nobody. There was no single inventor, no ancient genius, no doctor, no scientist. History built it. Agriculture made food, and daily life more predictable. Different societies created different traditions. Breakfast gradually expanded. Lunch became a regular midday meal, and industrial schedules helped organize eating around the clock, which means the 3 meals sitting on your schedule today carry centuries of social change behind them. And that's the strangest part. Something that feels completely natural wasn't simply created by the human body. It was shaped slowly by food, by work, by culture, and eventually by the clock. So tomorrow, when you sit down for breakfast, remember, you're not following a rule invented by some ancient genius. You're following a schedule that history built, one change at a time. And if you could erase one meal from your daily routine forever, breakfast, lunch, or dinner, which one would you choose? Subscribe to First Fire for more stories hiding behind the everyday things humans do.